How's it going, everyone? This is Mr. Lave with another video lecture. This one's going to be over Shakespearean sonnets. We're going to be answering the question, what makes a poem a Shakespearean sonnet? So if you haven't already, pause the video and set up some Cornell notes. Make sure you're listing the essential question at the very top, what makes a poem a Shakespearean sonnet? And in the top left-hand corner, make sure you put in the topic, Shakespearean sonnets. Now, to answer the question, what makes a poem a Shakespearean sonnet, we're going to have to talk about a few different things. First off, we're going to talk about this thing called lyric poetry. Shakespearean sonnets are a form of lyric poetry. We'll get into that here in a minute. Then we're going to talk about what a sonnet is in general, because a Shakespearean sonnet is just a particular type of sonnet. So we'll talk about what a sonnet is just overall. We're also going to have to talk about the formatting of a Shakespearean sonnet when we get into the particulars of Shakespearean sonnets. Then we're going to talk about these things called quatrains. It's a type of stanza. We'll get into that later on. Then we're also going to talk about these things called couplets, which you've definitely run into before. We're also going to have to talk about rhyme scheme because a Shakespearean sonnet has a very particular type of rhyme scheme. So we'll get to that here in a moment. And we're also going to talk about meter because in addition to a particular type of rhyme scheme, we also have to have a particular meter in a Shakespearean sonnet. And then we're going to round this out by simply reviewing all the things that we talked about. So let's go ahead and get started by talking about what lyric poetry is. Now, again, a Shakespearean sonnet is just one form of lyric poetry. Some other types of lyric poetry are things like free verse poems and haiku. Now, what is a lyric poem? Lyric poetry has a musical quality that expresses the thoughts and feelings of a speaker. It does not tell a complete story, but does describe an emotion or a mood, often by using vivid imagery, which we've talked about in class. In other words, showing, not telling. So describing in detail what something looks like, what something sounds like, what it tastes like, what it smells like, what it feels like. A lyric poem is relatively short and produces a single effect. So a novel, for example, can produce a lot of different effects because you have all those pages to be able to do that. A lyric poem is a little bit different because it's so short, you essentially have to have one goal in mind and strive towards that one goal, as opposed to something longer like a novel where you can strive to accomplish tons of different things. So let's go ahead and add one more thing to that. Poets can use a variety of lyric forms or structures to explore topics and themes and create different effects. Now, one type of lyric poetry, again, are sonnets. Now, we're going to talk about sonnets in general right now. A sonnet is a 14-line poem that is usually written in iambic pentameter and often rhymes. We'll talk about those things very shortly. Two common sonnet types are the Italian or Petrarchan and the English or Shakespearean sonnet. We're focusing on Shakespearean sonnets today. So let's go ahead and zoom in on those Shakespearean sonnets. Now, off to the right, you see that bright white box, probably hurting your eyes right now. We're going to be referring back to that box for examples. So you'll see little boxes pop up within it. They're going to be red boxes that'll kind of highlight and circle things. So let's go ahead and talk about formatting first. Shakespearean sonnets are usually presented with no spaces between stanzas, which are unified by their distinct ideas and rhyme schemes. So instead of showing that a stanza is a stanza by doing a double space or something like that, instead we simply identify it by the rhyme scheme and what idea it's talking about. So it's a little bit harder to piece out until you start to learn what the actual rhyme scheme of a Shakespearean sonnet is and how we separate the different ideas. So let's go ahead and move on after that. Now, in terms of the stanzas, we have these things called quatrains. So you see those boxes that popped up. The first four lines where it says A, B, A, B. The second group of four lines where it says C, D, C, D. And the third group of four lines where it says E, F, E, F. A Shakespearean sonnet has three quatrains, which are four-line stanzas. Each explores a different aspect of the poem's theme, and each also has its own rhyme scheme. Now, when we say that it explores a different aspect of the poem's theme, we can introduce the theme in one, talk about one perspective in another, and talk about a completely different perspective on another, so we get this very balanced view of it, kind of like an essay where each paragraph, or actually each body paragraph talks about a different supporting idea. It's kind of like that. And again, they also have their own rhyme schemes. So you have A, B, A, B, and then C, D, C, D, and then EF, EF, just like that. Now the last two lines, which you see pointed out right now with that red box, are what we refer to as a couplet. A couplet consists of two successive rhyming lines in a verse and has the same meter to form a complete thought. Now, by successive, we mean it's just one right after another. So you see those two G's at the very bottom, GG? Those are what we refer to as a couplet. In a Shakespearean sonnet, the couplet is the two lines at the end which present a concluding statement. So essentially, after we explore those different ideas with those three different quatrains, we have a concluding statement at the end. Kind of like an essay where you use the body paragraphs to explore an idea, and then at the very last paragraph of your essay, you kind of wrap it up with your conclusion. We do the same thing with a Shakespearean sonnet where we explore the different ideas with its three different quatrains and then use the couplet to kind of conclude everything and bring everything together. Now, of course, we see another red box popping up, and that's going to be signaling our rhyme scheme. So it says A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. Now, every Shakespearean sonnet has that rhyme scheme, with very few exceptions. A couple of them do break it. Let's go ahead and look at it. A rhyme scheme is a pattern of rhymes at the end of each line of a poem or song. It is usually referred to by using letters to indicate which lines rhyme. Lines designated with the same letter all rhyme with each other. So if we look over there, if you notice our first and third line, our first line ends with the word day, and our third line ends with the word may. They both have the letter A. Now that's because they both rhyme. Now what I want to point out is that we just use the letters in order. So every time we have a new sound at the end of a line, we give it a new letter. So that's why day and temperate don't rhyme, so we give them two separate letters. That's why we start off with AB. Now, if we jump down to the bottom where it says CD, CD, we have shines, dimmed, declines, untrimmed. Our two D lines have the same letter because dimmed rhymes with trimmed. And our two C lines have the same letter because shines rhymes with declines. In a Shakespearean sonnet, the lines in each quatrain follow a regular pattern of AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to this thing called meter. Meter is a unit of rhythm in poetry, the pattern of the beats. It is also called a foot, so we'll be using both words here and there in our class. We're going to try to stick to using the word foot because that's what we see referred to most often in analyses of literature. Each foot has a certain number of syllables in it, usually 2 or 3 syllables. The difference in types of meter in which syllables are accented and which are not. So we'll talk about that here in a minute. For those of you who can write and read in Spanish, it's going to be a little bit easier to pick up on this because in the Spanish language, it's part of the conventions there that we actually put the accent marks in the actual words when we write them. Other words, like mas and mas, they mean two different things depending on whether or not there's an accent there. The English language is a little bit different. We still have stressed and unstressed syllables, but we don't really use those accent marks whenever we write words out. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about what we mean by this. To give you an example, we're going to be focusing on these things called iambs, and in particular, we're going to be talking about this thing called iambic pentameter. It's a big word, makes you sound really smart. Now, we're focusing on this because William Shakespeare uses this a lot. So this is going to be how we talk about meter, how we talk about verse, is by referring back to these things called iambic pentameter. So let's go and figure out what an iamb is first. We'll again start referring back to that picture that you see over there on the right-hand side. The word iambic refers to the pattern of syllables. Okay, so it's a specific pattern. An iamb consists of 2 syllables arranged in an unstressed stress pattern. So over there on our example, you see da-dum, 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 da-dum. Jump into the last line, the lay, de doth, protest, a bit, too much. So we always go unstressed, stressed. Unstressed means it's a little bit quieter. So that's why we have that little ballerina shoe. And stress means it's a little bit louder. It punches out. Now, an easy way to figure this out is just to take out all of the consonants. So only leave yourself the syllables. So L-A, D-A, protest, a bit, too much. So we kind of have that little bouncing feel. Now, this is something that's significant for William Shakespeare because he ends up writing a lot of his words in this pattern so that whenever those words are read out loud or performed, it gives a different lyrical, musical quality to the words being presented. The word pentameter refers to the fact that each line has 5 iambs. So you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That means that a line of poetry in a Shakespearean sonnet has 10 syllables. They're all broken up into these patterns of 2 syllables. It goes unstressed, stressed, like the word hello, eh-oh. Hello. That's an iambic word because there's 2 syllables and it goes unstressed, stressed. Now, just because it's iambic doesn't mean that it has to be just one word. So sometimes you'll see a word that's broken up so that part of the iamb is in one set and the other is in another. All right, let's take that a little bit further by just kind of going through and reviewing right now. Now, what makes a poem a Shakespearean sonnet? First off, it's a type of lyric poetry. That means that it has a musical quality. It also expresses thoughts or feelings. Second, it has a very particular formatting. There are no spaces between stanzas. Stanzas are unified by ideas and rhyme schemes. There are 3 quatrains. Each explores a different aspect of the poem's theme. Then we have couplets. Those are the last 2 lines. And they're concluding comments. So they conclude all of the idea that's being built throughout the rest of the poem. Then we have the rhyme scheme, which consists of AB, AB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. Finally, we have this thing called iambic pentameter. So every single line has to be written in this thing called iambic pentameter. Now, actually, before I give you that example, what that means again is that they're written I'm referring to syllables. The syllables are written in pairs. They go unstressed, stressed. That's what an iamb is. Penta, as in pentagon, refers to 5. So there are 5 iambs. So there are 2 times 5, which equals 10 syllables. Just like the word hello in English. He-o. Hello. Again, in Spanish, this is a little bit easier to pick up on because we actually actively use the accent marks when we're writing things out, like papa, another iambic word. So all of these things together make a poem a Shakespearean sonnet. So go ahead and finish up these notes. A lot of this stuff is a lot more complicated, so we're going to be doing a lot of activities in class. A lot of hands-on things to get a better feel for this. So if you're still feeling a little bit lost, we're going to be doing a lot of review by taking these Cornell notes through the rest of the Cornell note steps, but also doing a lot of active activities in class. So make sure you're paying close attention. Also, make sure you're asking questions. Now, as you move on to the annotation section of your notes, make sure that you're also making good use of those question marks. In particular, I need to see what parts of this are still confusing. So make sure you put in those question marks in there so that I can keep track of what we need to go over again in class and what you might need extra help on. So if you have any questions, make sure you put in those question marks. Make sure you're asking good questions in those in that question column. And if you need anything else, just make sure you're getting a hold of me. Thank you. Bye.